So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiajo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to figure out where smart buildings is going, and just have a general chit chat about it. Panelists, the list of panelists is available on mondaylive.org if you wonder who we are. The most important thing is just to point out that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Do post your questions and comments on the Zoom chat, especially today, because we're just going to have a sort of a freewheeling conversation about ESG. And also this deck, if you're interested in any of the links, is also on mondaylive.org. This month of June, we have been talking about ESG. This is the last episode of this. And so we'll continue that conversation. So we'll have our normal general chit chat, what's going on, and then we're going to have an open discussion. And we don't really know where this is going to go. So please do chime in from the audience to guide us along the way to something useful. And just to point out that next Monday is July 4th, so we will be dark. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken. What's going on, Ken?
Yep, thank you very much. Okay, we have our June issue online, which is why AI. Getting good response out of that. We're working on our July issue. We've entitled it or themed it ESGs Are Us. And I think I may have to add a question mark after listening to the preamble before we get the meeting started. But I do think that it is certainly opening a bunch of doors and a lot of discussion. I know our contributing editor, Brad White, has got an article coming, and they've been working at this for a couple of years, and it's the mainstay of their business now. So it certainly is generating interest in a lot of areas. I think what happens a little bit is a lot of the stuff is out of our range, which isn't probably correct. So that's why I think we need to make a little bit of noise that we are ESGs, and I think I've got a great article from John Petsy on that as well. So this is the article that caught my attention, and I think it kind of fits into the same pattern. Is we keep moving in a direction that we know we're going to change, but we're not exactly sure how we're going to change. And I think the ESG falls into that category again. It's going to have a radical effect on us, but the actual mechanics of how that's all going to work, we don't really know. And this is just the the metaverse. People either say wow or start laughing when you mention that word. The fact that McKinsey has put some teeth into it impresses me. And what they say is no one knows what the metaverse is in recent months, but in recent months it's been clear that there's no single definition. And I think that's it. It's just more of an idea and concepts put together. We're hard at our reinvention, and we're bumping into all of this stuff too. It's like, how is this done now, and how will it be done in the future? And it's complex, but I think we just have to jump off the cliff and learn how to fly before we hit bottom. So. And in the McKinsey report, there's this also 47% describe the metaverse with vibrant clarity, using such terms as immersive, interactive, and scaled network. But one of the most accurate descriptors came from a teenager who described the metaverse as a scaled, interoperable, I thought you guys would like that word, network of real-time 3D virtual worlds. So I'll leave that, pass it back to you, Anto.
Thank you again. I suspect it's one of these things that we'll all know it when we see it, whenever that is.
That's right, whatever it is.
Okay, thank you. John.
Yeah, so on the topic of ESG that we're talking about, I saw a new term, ESG plus R, meaning resilience, okay? And, as the acronyms grow, for us in our industry, which is why we're talking about this, right? Throughout the last 2 years, we've tried to bring up subjects, and as we learn, maybe share information with everyone else who listens to us. Huge portion of it relates to running buildings properly, intelligently, right? And understanding the needs of your tenants and, owners and occupiers. So, but this was an interesting article because it says maybe the ranting critics of sustainability have a good point. I really suggest people look at that one. That link is over to the right of that article, so that's up there. And then this one down below is the one I was talking about, where they're adding the term R, resilience, so that buildings are able to withstand, surprising events like COVID and other things. So, and then one, continued government focus on energy efficiency and see the word again, resilience in buildings. So everybody will have to get their marketing, copy and add the word resilience every place you have energy efficiency and ESG, because now you got to include that term in there. So, but again, we're all trying to figure out how this impacts our buildings and how we can benefit from it and help building owners benefit from it.
John, I was also doing some research on ESG and happened to come across an article on Realcomm's site, and they also have resilience in their definition. So they went with ESG plus R. So maybe Green Buzz was picking up on that. I don't know where it's coming from, but interesting that Realcomm did the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I missed that session. And one other comment before we move on. One of the I haven't got permission to use it yet, and I'll reach out, see if we can. But an industry analyst firm, misaligned incentives, the biggest problem out there. And even leads to your favorite word, Jim Lee, procurement, right? As one of the major barriers that is just affecting the whole built environment. So.
Okay, good.
And on the topic of R, beside resiliency, I also heard it referred to as reputation. And that the whole, part of the ESG movement, and we can probably get into this as we get into discussion, is about a company's reputation and what ESG, what you're doing or not doing, and how it affects a company's or corporate reputation.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Interesting. It's so interesting. Thank you, John, for adding complexity and confusion to the ESG.
That's
we don't have enough of that, right, Bill?
That's been my role. But hey, please look at that one in the bottom left. I think we had some guest speakers a while back who asked about, is the impact of these strategies showing up in increased facility value? And that article says it is, and it's proven that, certified, efficient, ESG compatible buildings have higher average sale price and get a higher rent. So I think the evidence is there, even though it's dispersed. And, maybe some people would believe in this article and others will believe in others, but more efficient buildings are more valuable. So
I'll second that. I found a couple things that basically said that, and I've got a couple notes that I brought, and I'm trying to find the actual statistic that was equated to the article or articles that I had, but at the end of the day is, I could not agree more that I think is what people are trying to equate the ESG to, is value that is not our traditional value, how we think of it on a daily basis, but more about the building and the asset, the building as an asset, and what it means to the company's value as well. So something to think about.
But that's always been a common theme of all the initiatives that we've seen over the years, right? LEED and Energy Star, and you can go on and on. A consistent message from them has always been, a value proposition from them has always been that more efficient buildings are more valuable. It would be interesting. I'm sure someone's done it to see an actual study of that, given the decades that message has been messaged.
Yeah, and I just found this. So what this, and I forget who I found this from, is so one, higher profitability for the company, not so much the building, but the building owner, operator, and or the tenants in that building. Also, that it increases the chances of being able to borrow or fund at a lower cost to get expansion capital, which kind of makes sense, lowers the systematic risk and so forth and so on. So I think, you know, if we look at this from a positive perspective, there is much more outcomes and values that if you believe in ESG and you believe that our industry technology can contribute to it, I think there's a lot more here than, you know, we're learning. I mean, again, none of us have the answers. It's still early on the journey at the end of the day. So
It's interesting. Mark, it's starting to occur to me positively in a process kind of way, almost like, to make an analogy, it'll be crude, like the ISO, you know, oh, you're ISO 9000. I mean, it's half marketing, but half you've got to do some work to get that.
Right.
Good point.
Okay, so that's great. I'm sure we'll continue this conversation. I actually came up with this article from Metricus. I'm not sure whether you guys have come across this site. It's new to me, but they've sort of produced this. I think it's a bit of a living document, because the link that I put here is actually a sort of a June 22 update. So obviously it's been going on for some while. I'm not sure it gives anything new, given the discussions that we've had, but it's very, very long. It's like 84 pages long, and it actually goes through everything, and it sort of catalogs all of the different issues, many of the issues that we've talked about here, risks and price of capital and everything else. And they get down to, there's one section talking about BMS, and this quote here was talking about with them talking about BMS, you know, recognizing it that it's something helpful, but sort of questioning the expense of it, or questioning the relationship between the expense of that and ESG. So that's kind of, and they go into a lot more HVAC sort of arguments. This quote I thought was interesting, problem with ESG is proving it. That's what IoT is for. You know, so it all feeds into the same thing over and over again. And obviously IoT, we can take that at its broadest meaning, and then, you know, there's a whole section on value. Anyway, it's just if for somebody new, this is a sort of I would suggest is a good place for somebody to sort of figure out what all of the different aspects of ESG is all about.
Good.
So with that, and other thoughts, or
just Jim Lee here, coming in from Toronto today. I'm at the ASHRAE summer meeting, and a lot of interesting topics up here. This morning I went to some good seminars on cybersecurity given by the Army Corps of Engineers and others. You know, really material, serious stuff going on. A lot of work going on in ASHRAE, a lot of work going on in other areas in NIST, but I would say that cybersecurity is getting ever more real in the industry, and people are taking it seriously. So that was good to see. I also went to a track on Division 25, and it occurs to me that there is a ton of work going on Division 25. For those of you who are participating in those forums associated with Monday Live, certainly a lot of fresh work coming out of GPC 13. So there's supposed to be a bunch of new work there, and people that I haven't even heard of coming out with, you know, broad presentations on Division 25. So the entire Division 25 was a hot topic here. That's my report from ASHRAE.
Great.
great stuff. Great stuff. Any other topics or thoughts? Hearing none, let us move on. So next month, our month topic is going to be overcoming barriers. What barriers? That's for us to figure out over the course of July. And we've kind of touched on this theme about a year or so back. I think that was or they were very sort of interesting conversations. So I think it'll be also interesting for us, and maybe understanding ESG is one of the barriers that we should try and figure out how to overcome. But a reminder that we won't be on next Monday because it's 4th of July. So I hope everybody has a good and safe 4th of July celebration. And so we're back to ESG, and I'm going to stop my share and then just open it up to conversation here. So how do you want to start?
Well, I was going to comment back on Bill's point about the equivalency with 9001. I think that's an interesting equivalency in some ways. For those of you who've been through 9001, you know, what's the review and the process. If you've done it, you know that the process is basically, you know, tell us what you do, document what you do, and follow what you've documented. I mean, that's pretty what 9001 does. And then there's this step beyond that that says, and now improve it. You know, it doesn't actually ask you to change your way of business immediately. What it really says is just document what you say you do and follow what you say you do, and then look at improving your processes as you go. And if you follow that, you can get your 9001 qualification. A lot of what I hear about ESG is a very similar model right now. Is just document a lot of the things that you do already, you know, from an E, S, and G perspective. And then, you know, continue to follow it, and then ultimately improve upon those initiatives that you are currently doing. And that's one of the things I see, like I said, is that most people are tackling it from there's things I already do, you know, there's processes and stuff that I do that fall into every one of those different sections. They're probably not well documented from a corporate process. You know, we just do these things as a company. And the first part of what I hear a lot about ESG messaging is just write that down and bring it internally and make sure that you follow those processes, and then take the next step of now do better, you know, from that benchmark. So I think your 9001 is an interesting analogy for me, as opposed to you have to change everything you do and you have to change all your processes and all the ways that you, that's never going to get anywhere, right? People are going, that's just too much.
Well, Anno, I would say that there is a substantial difference, and that is ESG gets scored by lots of third parties, and those scores then become relevant to the to not only the stakeholders but the stock price of the company, and which ISO 9001 never had that kind of impact.
Yeah, true.
So I think that's a big difference, and why I think that's so important for our industry is we've always suffered from having top-down visibility to what we do. We've always had to work bottom up. And so for the first time in my career, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but it's a good talking point, is we've actually got the C-suite taking a look at what we're doing. So we have an opportunity to talk directly to the C-suite, and this is a great opportunity, I think. We've been telling the story for 30 years, but they don't care. All of a sudden they care. So that's, to me, the opportunity.
Yeah,
I gotta, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, Steve, to your point, they care, but the difference, in my opinion, this time around is they are forced into caring.
Right.
Before, they were not forced.
Mhm.
And the force, be with you, so to speak, is the global change towards climate, energy efficiency, companies practicing good corporate social responsibility. And I was kind of looking at this from a little bit different angle, and then digress for a minute, and then we come right back to that. Is in college, I took a few business courses on corporate social responsibility. All right, you can define that however you want to. Back then, it wasn't climate, it wasn't energy, it wasn't water, it wasn't indoor air quality, it wasn't data, it wasn't all this stuff that kind of is becoming associated with ESG. Is ESG the new replacement for this corporate social responsibility? I would argue that it is.
Yeah,
That it's the whole environmental side now, and the governance, and all the things that globally we've seen, you know, with changes of society and stuff. This is the new corporate social responsibility.
I would agree with that, Mark, but I want to actually, going back to what Steve said about that bottom-up approach, and I think that this is actually something great for next month when we're talking about blockers, is that from our perspective, we've always been, bottom-up facility manager. And now we've got different players. We've got facility managers, energy managers, sustainability managers, and the CXO level. And they're all coming into play. And one of the things that I struggle with in getting my sales team up to speed is now we're talking to different people. And they have different drivers, and how you position yourself is very different than the way it was before. The other thing is to what Mark was saying about the ESG and the carrot and the stick. You know, are they only doing this because they're being forced to do it? And I think that, yes, that's probably the case, but I also think that there are other factors at play as well. If you can start seeing that, that the asset itself, the building is an asset itself, and that the impact of that asset on the bottom line is becoming more integral. And I know as a group, we've talked about this before, and how on some companies it can be very, very minor. But if you start looking at whether or not people are starting to buy or lease or space based on whether or not they meet certain ESG goals, if you can see that a building is valued more because of its sustainability or the technology it is, that's it within it. I heard something the other day called property as a service. And I thought that was kind of interesting, property as a service. And what it meant was not only of just the leasing of the property, but all the other things that come into play there, the things that are kind of intrinsic value to a tenant that would lease that. But I also think that things like, if you start seeing resale values increase because of the technology within the building and the sustainability of the building, but also things like insurance rates. If insurance companies that provide commercial property insurance start saying, hey, I'm gonna give you a better premium because you're monitoring that building, because you have leak detection in there, you have analytic rules in there, you have your indoor air quality. And, just like your car now, my insurance agent wants me to put this thing on my car to determine my driving pattern. Well, of course I don't do that. But the thing of it is when you start doing this with buildings, is that going to be a driver and a motivating factor for this as well? So I think that yeah, we can get the carrot and the stick, but I also think that it might prevail in the next few years that there are other factors that are driving this change. So I'll shut up now.
So I got some, we have not tackled insurance and for 2 years. And I think Gina just brought up an area that I think makes a whole lot of sense to see if we can find some speakers from the insurance industry, because not only from the protection of the building from flood damage, maybe fire, things that we can alarm against, but cyber. So cyber premiums have gone up a lot for insurance recently. And I get this question all the time because it's an area that I'm, as you guys know, I'm involved in, is, well, if I do all this great stuff to protect my building from a cyber perspective, what does it do for my insurance policy? And we really need to get some insurance executives participating in this dialogue, because there's no question it would be valuable if some of these, if a carrier or two came out and said, great, hey, if you're doing X, Y, and Z, I'm going to reduce your policy by 10%. And similarly on the protection side, why not? Because I don't think, what my experience has been, these guys don't look at buildings that way. They don't look at the power of information to improve the outcome of the building from how they underwrite the property.
Steve, there was a very powerful session at Realcomm. Anto and I attended, so Mark attended as well, where there were a panel of 3 insurance experts, and I thought they were completely serious and tuned into the story with the buildings. The problem is there are other insurance groups that go beyond cybersecurity. This was mainly a cybersecurity forum. The other insurance companies, people like Factory Mutual that insure industrial assets, would be much better on a separate kind of panel on ESG than on cybersecurity alone. But there are some relatively smart people thinking about this. I don't know how to connect to them personally.
Fred just suggested something on chat.
Great.
He may be able to help. So
So I can give you a reason as someone who spent 10 years in commercial insurance. Surprise. You have to look at the risk managers. So the risk managers and the actuaries. So the actuaries are the ones that give the data, but you would look at any risk manager in an insurance company, and there are national organizations that are devoted to risk management and insurance. And that's where you need to start, because they're the ones that drive what insurance companies focus on. And so, getting back to the thing, like when you're talking about leak detection, that's a big one now, because it's not only about losing water and having to repair something, but it's about the damage that it does and the water that gets in the walls and the mold that grows there. And then everybody's suing for a work comp claim because of this, that, and the other. You'll also see a lot of that in schools as well, where parents are now looking very closely at buildings and the environmental impact on the health of their children. And then you can also look at certain, especially, this is odd, I think, but there's like schools with clusters, and they're trying to figure out what are these clusters, of diseases or things that are popping up in certain commercial buildings that are not understood. And then, so insurance, if you want to look at what the insurance do and how do you talk to them, you start with the risk manager.
Okay, so where do you go to do that? What type of a forum might we, those of us involved in intelligent building, say, hey, we think that there's a lower risk if a variety of intelligent building technologies are applied? Where would we get that message across?
So there are a lot of risk management, just like we have industry associations and trade shows. There's a lot of risk management associations out there that have the same thing. In fact, there was one, I think, a couple of months ago, and this actually was a topic there. I forgot the name of this one, and I'll have to.
Okay, cool.
I've got it written down. I can send that to you.
Real interesting path.
Yeah.
But I'll say, folks, because I've been digging into this a little bit myself, it's budding and it's novel on all sides, even the insurance folks. So there are a few, Jim alluded to this. There are a few that have dug into this, and they're smart and they're getting it. So you really got to get to this small subset of people who understand this.
I think there's a bigger picture when you start talking about insurance that I started thinking about the insurance company, the amount of money they put back into the building industry by actually owning buildings and mortgages and stuff.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking that there's also a movement that's driving this whole ESG movement that is coming from folks wanting to ensure that their investments. So where we've got large investments from unions and stuff like that, they're actually asking that you prove to us that you are very responsive and create ESG, or you live by the rules of ESG or whatever that is. So anyway, I think that's an interesting twist as well, as the thing that finances our industry is actually calling out for ESG. So we need to understand what that is.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that's a great point. What we're seeing is, I mean, this could just be a basic score. We're not seeing the industry and our industry work together, the insurance industry, to see what rates are going to be. We're seeing whether they're even going to, it's a go, no go, on whether we're even going to insure you. It's still a binary. I mean, people are going to have to prove that they're insurable, believe it or not.
Yeah. So anyway,
That's certainly the case. That's certainly the case for cybersecurity, right? It's kind of like that. Are you saying that it may be like that with ESG?
No, what I'm saying is ESG, we started the conversation off today with ESG might actually be practical. So you might be able to, this is just me brainstorming, you might be able to somehow use ESG scores. I do know out in the pipelines, ESG is a big thing, and it's a practical issue. Might be able to use that to prove your insurability for cyber and some of this stuff. That's all I'm saying there.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Atto, if we can, I know Fred Gordy suggested he could be of help, but I think there's a lot of meat here on the bones for future Monday Lives to go down this path of insurance. At least 1 week, if not 2 or 3. Yeah.
Anto, do you want to circle back, or do you want to invite Fred to put in his 2 cents right now?
You're muted.
We should circle back.
Okay.
I think there are other sort of issues that relate to ESG to do with us, to do with managing data and the sort of the data part of which seems to be something that everybody in ESG, everybody talks about ESG, understands that. They understand it's all about data, but they may not understand what that means. What about data? What is the problem with data? They know that data can provide them with information about ESG, but is it true to say that that there's a gap there that we as data people can actually help with?
So let me throw a question out to John and Jim, who have been doing data analytics now for a long time. For your businesses, guys, do you think is ESG, does it make it easier to tell your story, to get an audience, to particularly at a technical level, to when you bring up the idea of analyzing historical data and finding gold in it? Is this presenting an opening for you? Because the argument, one of the things we've been doing for 2 years is how do we get data analytics to be just a standard part of every control system that goes in, right? And we haven't had anything to hang our hat on. So I'm quite asking, is ESG, do you see that as being a way to really get data analytics become a standard feature in buildings?
I'll go first, Jim.
Sure. I think that aspirationally, I would like that to be the case, Steve. Right now, we are traditionally still in the divide where the janitorial closet is not talking to C-suite. A lot of the customers at a tactical level are not that engaged in it. And when we try to have those discussions, there's always interest, but I would not attribute it to a direct buying influence right now. I would like to change that because I believe in what you said at the beginning of the conversation, which is this is a unique opportunity for us to get up to the C-suite and drive back down. But I can't honestly say that's happening yet. John?
Ooh, ditto. Yeah, I think, you know, that whole concept, aspirationally, it should be. But think about what ESG and now R embraces. You know, I'll be honest, for us, I mean, we have a really powerful solution for one part of that. Is that who you're talking to, or can even reach, or even understands it? Who has been assigned responsibility for ESG overall in organizations, and do they know what a kilowatt is? Right? Not necessarily, because of the way it's coming down from the C-suite, where S&G may be the things they are more knowledgeable in and touch their roles more, right? So we ended up, again, as Jim said, we end up with the operators who may have absolutely, you know, be invisible to the C-suite who's intending to pay attention to ESG.
So let me just circle back to that, John, and I think that was kind of the point I was trying to make earlier with the analogy of the 9001. I do see, back to that, you know, at the moment, most of the people responsible for the ESG, they're looking around within the organizations and going, what do we do today? You know, what are things that we have already got? And to be honest, that's what I was trying to say earlier. I think there's one of the immediate opportunities, because if you get in your messaging to the guy, Jim, who is in the closet, to go, dude, you need to raise your hand. Your C-suite is asking questions on what we are doing today on ESG. And you need to put your hand up to say, we're already doing some stuff, and here's the stuff that we're doing. It actually does get the C-suite's attention, because they are, like I said, they're trying to glom onto anything that they're currently doing before we start inventing new things all over again. And the couple of times that we've looked at it, we've had that attention. But someone says, well, hang on, didn't know we were doing this for all the reasons you said, Jim, because, you know, he was buried in the closet and no one gave a shit.
Right.
And now, but if you're raising your hand up to those, you know, those guys, they're actually getting their attention. They go, whoa, hang on, this is good. And it kind of fits into our program. It might not be, as you say, John, the be all and end all, right? Because they do have much bigger aspirational plans as to where this thing is going to go. But as a first step is just providing awareness to the C-suite that, you know, that there are people in your organization who are doing things today that you should at least lock down.
I agree. Aspirational, it looks positive, it looks helpful, but, you know, like Jim said, it's the connection is weak so far that I've seen.
I think one thing that's important to understand is that when we talk about the C-suite never does any thinking anymore. They pay people to do the thinking for them. Those people are consultants and big advisory firms. They are the ones that are doing the thinking on a paid basis for the C-suite, and they are the ones that don't know what's going on. They're the ones we have to reach as intermediaries. C-suite's going to do what the consultants tell them to do. We've got to get to those intermediaries.
So can we go back to what John kind of alluded to? And I'm going to try to stretch this a little bit. So the S and the G part, I think we all on the conversation, I think we pretty much understand the E part. I think that's, you know, generally. Now, how does the E part of all of this affect the S part and the G part? So from the S part, or social, I look at it as if you are doing the E part, that you are creating a good reputation company, or you're creating that good reputation, which is part of the S, the social part, that it also, especially when it comes to controlling the environment within buildings, that you are managing relationships with your workforce socially responsible, and that you're doing the right thing for the community or communities at large in which your buildings are managed and operated. And ultimately, you're creating a perception that if somebody thinks of your building or your company, that, I associate them with good environmental practices. Now, let me go to the G part for a minute. And again, I could be stretching it. From the G part, it's all about, when it comes to governance, it's really, I think we alluded to when we started talking about insurance. It's mitigating the risk and the just creating opportunities that are beneficial to the building or the people who are occupants within the building. Also, cybersecurity, I think, again, probably could play a spin here with the G part. And then finally, let's look at the data. I think we all agree that data is the key to this whole thing and foundation. The fact that we are ensuring the integrity of the data. We are the language we've been using, normalizing it, being able to get it from all the different silos, being able to put it in one centralized place where people can pull from that data, etc. I think that we play a part in the S and the G. And again, that's how I think of it. I could be stretching the truth. I don't know.
I can't speak to the S as much, but for the G, Mark, I mean, in our value propositions, we're doing direct evaluation of compliance data and governance data, which is not necessarily energy data. I'm talking about contractual compliance or measuring of other physical parameters, which might, either have a environmental or a OSHA or other components. So there are many things that we can do with analytics that affect G. S more indirectly, and E, I think, is obvious.
Right.
Anybody else have that kind of experience, or as Jim, data for other uses other than controls and energy? Doesn't appear to be so.
Yeah, no, we had a customer or a partner who did a project for a city around bringing together social data related to, I don't want to say crime, but disturbances, traffic, other things that affected the quality of life, excluding crime. They excluded crime from it, but affected the quality of life. They called it the social thermometer. When it was about bringing together that type of data, which still does have a time element to it, and showing municipal regions, what was happening, where there were hot spots of problems that were affecting the quality of life for people who lived in those areas of the city. So yeah, data can be used in all these different ways, and the concepts of software that can detect patterns of relationships and correlations and measure data, it does extend across a lot of different things. But the question is, the selling, who you have to talk to and sell doesn't, right?
Correct.
Those people were interested in that. They probably didn't know what a KW was, type of thing. So it becomes I have the tool set. I could repair bikes or Ferraris. I'm going to be talking to two different people to get a job repairing a bike or a Ferrari, right? And they're not the same person. I think that gets to, one of the big challenges. There are so many facets and domains of experience and responsibility in a building. There isn't one person to talk to, sell to, or help.
Right.
Well, and that's kind of why I was going back to my point about raising your hand, at least having the people that you deal with today to raise their hand about the initiatives that they are doing, to whether it is the consultant or the C-suite, whoever is taking on the lead on the ESG projects. Like I said before, I do find they are trying to mine their companies for what do we do today. And I think part of our problem is the guys in the closets going, I don't think our stuff counts. And I keep slapping them around and go, no, it does really count. You just need to put your hand up. I have seen one occasion where the guy goes, Yeah, I don't want to put my hand up because it means a whole bunch of work I don't want to do, you know, so
I
there's a
think that's the-
resistance.
I think that's the rule, Anno. That's the
Yeah.
problem with our industry. That's the rule, not the exception.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that, right, is that as much as the influence of the guy that we've got saying, well, you need to raise your hand to the ESG consultant out there who's trying to find stuff, the response is, that sounds like work, you know.
And an unfunded mandate, I might point out. Too.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Which is so I mean, to cut the guy a little slack, it's not just that he's lazy. He sees, you know, a buzzsaw of work with no funding and no support coming at him.
Right.
yeah,
And
no
then, by
resources.
the way, you know, now you're relying on my meter system, but I know the meter system's crap and nobody's put a dime into it in years. And, you know, I know it's no good and I know the numbers aren't going to be accurate. And now somebody's going to hold my feet to the fire without funding that.
So maybe that's one of the paths, right? How do we get that guy to overcome his, you know, or how do we help him get funding in the scope of an ESG initiative? If the management is saying, what initiatives have we got? And the guy's going like, I don't want to say because it means work. How about helping him come up with a strategy on here's how you get funding and resource to put your hand up if you did put your hand up?
Yeah, we could help him, but you know, you can help him put together a budget that he can present. Here's a solution. Here's what it costs roughly. And here's, you know, the kind of money that potentially could be saved. So yeah, that is leveraging the people we already know, i.e. the bottom up approach, but we're arming them because we now know that whether they're hearing it or not, we know this stuff's happening at the C-suite. And you know, for some of these individuals, they'll see it as a career opportunity for them to look good, right? And raise their profile within the organization. Not going to happen universally, obviously, right? But if you can find those individuals that see this as an opportunity, let's arm them with some good materials and some good statistics to work with.
So, and that's part of our problem, right? Is one of our challenges is we don't really know and understand. Let's take customer A, the large corporation, they put an ESG consultant or guy in charge to say, here, you know, we need to go make all this happen. One of the things we're not privy to is what budgets have they been given to do this work, right? They must be given, if at the management level, at the board level, if they're going down enough to engage a consultant, they must be allocating some budget.
Yeah.
So one of our challenges is how do we get knowledge about those budgets and how do we position the guy we know to be able to tap into those budgets, right? Because that, if we can match those two pieces, to your point, then you're going to get some traction. But if there's no budget assigned or if the only budget is assigned to a consultant, right, and that's all we're doing is just a report, then you're right. As the guy in the closet, I'm not going to put my hand up because I know nothing will come of it because it's just a report. If there is some meaty budget applied to the project, though, if there is there's an initial discovery budget and then an execution budget, then we need to work out for our guy to get that information and how to be able to tap into that allocated budget, because that's the only way it's going to move, per Jim's point.
So just on
I'm
that.
sorry. Go ahead, John.
So a recent example related, you know, you talk about, you know, there needs to be an execution budget. The state of, just one example, property owner, not insignificant, is they don't understand enough about what they want to do to allocate anything beyond an initial and not huge dollar investigation report, not by us, but by, you know, and so, you know, the classic cases of trying to qualify the sale, well, there'll be something there. You don't know there will be, and you can't demand it because the customer doesn't know enough to make a decision to allocate any dollars to what execution will come out of it. So that's just where this segment or this opportunity of our industry is for many, many customers today.
So that's a good point, right? So what we're really saying, and I echo that, John, I agree 100%. Right now, most of our customers are in the discovery
Yeah.
exploration phase,
Well said.
and they've only allocated budget for that discovery phase.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
may or may not put budget afterwards, and so at this point in time, there's not much you can do. There's not much you can participate in the discovery phase. There's a little bit of awareness, and here's what's possible, and here's what you're doing, and all that sort of stuff already. But not a lot of funds are going to come out of that.
I think my point of view is it's the consultants that are sucking all that money out of the room now. It's
Yeah.
the consultants that are trying to figure out their long-term umbilical cord to keep sucking that. And if we don't get to those people and show them that we are going to provide the data feed that they can disintermediate us between us and the C-suite, if we don't get to that level, we're nowhere.
So we've used the word our industry several times in this conversation. Jim's mentioned it, John's mentioned it. And our industry is probably regarded as the janitorial stuff by a lot of people up in the C-suite. So isn't that in itself a problem? And is that not something that we actually have to change and start not to think about our industry as being that, but sort of redefine what we're all about? I have no idea how to do that, but isn't that important? Because why would a C-suite person listen to anybody that's involved in the janitorial stuff?
Mhm. Yeah.
That sounds like a good topic for next month, Anto.
Okay.
Barriers.
Barrier, yeah.
Puzzled till my puzzler's sore on that one, Anto. For the last 25 years. Look forward
Well,
to
I'm going to I'll keep beating my horse a little bit further. I think there is the opportunity back to the consultants. Again, if their job is to discover what is currently executing, and we try to get the guy to show the awareness, the only reason the C-suite is going to listen to the janitorial is if they believe there's a nugget in there. We have to convince them that there is a nugget in there in the first place, that there is something that they're doing that they put under the umbrella of janitorial that they should really pull out and separate out, right? And I think you reposition it, right? And so you have to convince them that, yeah, as much as there is cleaning toilets and washing the windows, there is this other thing that you paid for back when, that is a nugget all by itself that you should separate and bring out.
But I think the path of least resistance there to make that connection is carbon.
Yeah.
Because that is the thing at the C-suite and with ESG that we can care about. We know that the price of energy is going to be volatile, happens to be high now. We've seen it low. But if the planet keeps warming, hopefully carbon will continue to be perceived as more expensive.
And that's the ultimate measure.
Here's a question for you guys. It's talking about the janitorial side of the building and, that legacy. The fact that recently, let's say within the last year and a half, we don't just talk about HVAC anymore. We talk about OT, operational technology. Is that conversation change enough or a piece to move the conversation up the chain a little bit? So it's not perceived as the boiler side, but it's that the whole true concept of OT, taking into account the new workplace stuff, the air, all of that kind of stuff and so forth and so on.
I like it. It's got the word technology in it, not mop head. So
I'm wondering whether the word enterprise has to be, could be something that we leverage.
I think we're still missing the point. I think it's not rebadging our stuff all over is okay. We have to put it more in the terms of what the consultants and the C-suite's looking for. And that's part of our problem. I don't know. We can call it whatever we want, right? We can call it technology and enterprise and put all these great buzzwords. But if it doesn't line up with the mission of what the C-suite's looking for, and I don't know, and I know I haven't spent enough time to really understand what is it the real message, and I'm as much to blame. I'd get on a customer call and they start talking about this, and I'll just default to all the terminologies that I'm familiar and comfortable with. And maybe that's part of the problem is I don't know what these words are, what they're looking for. What is the thing so that I can use terminology that resonates with what they're looking for. It's a little bit like you've got a toolbox. To me, I'm like, we're one tool in the toolbox with the janitor, right? And to use my terminology, when I pull out what you guys call a wrench, I call a spanner. In Australia, it's called a spanner, right? And they're talking wrenches. I go, I got this really cool spanner. And I go, I don't know what a spanner is. But when they look at it, I go, oh yeah, that thing, that's really cool. That's what I want. Well, shit, I should have called it a wrench, And I think part of our problem is we don't know what is it when these ESG consultants are looking for and describing the space. And we know we've got the best wrench in that toolbox of the janitor. Of all the things that the janitor's got in his toolboxes, right? We got the best spanner, a wrench, right? So how do we get to use their terminologies and say, look, what you really need and what you're looking for is what's already in your toolbox? And I don't know by saying things like enterprise and data and stuff, are we just saying, we're just like all the other wrenches in the toolbox, right?
Good point. How do we figure that out?
How do we figure that out is the question, yeah.
Or is it actually known, or is it still being figured out by those people?
Well, I go back to Jim's point. I think where we are in this phase of the whole thing is I think the consultants are defining that, describing that, coming up with their terminologies for all that themselves right now. And I think part of our mission should be to plug ourselves in with ththese consultants to find out.
Yeah, I agree.
Have those, right, and talk about what are you looking for? What are you trying to do? What are the words that because when you put that report together, I want to be one of those wrenches in that report that says, by the way, you've got a wrench already, and I found it over here in the janitorial closet, and you guys have buried it. It's awesome, except you called it a spanner. Well, that was stupid.
So I just sent you guys a link while we were talking. I typed in ESG consultants, and the first one that popped up was Korn Ferry, who's mostly like an executive recruitment firm.
Yeah.
But there they were at the top of the Google search, and they describe in the link the scope of their consulting services for ESG, and it was pretty broad. And I'm pretty sure McKinsey, is out there doing ESG consulting. So to the degree that we could make some contacts with some of these firms and tell our story, we're going to learn a lot about how to present this.
I agree with you, Steve. I think if we wanted to get some people in on who we should talk to, I'd love to talk to some of these ESG consultants that have been tasked with putting the reports together, because I want to know what's going in those reports.
Yeah,
Did we do that a few months ago?
I don't know. We got these
guys on here.
We had the two guys on the beginning of this month.
It seemed like some fast talking back then, but I got to wrap up. I got a call at the top of the hour.
They were focused on the ratings side of it.
They were focused on the ratings, they weren't
not
selling consulting to companies. They were just selling the rating service.
And if you look at Korn Ferry, obviously you said it, Steve, they specialize in talent and recruiting and so forth and so on. They're coming at it from the S perspective, the social perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think you'll see, depending on the specialty of these consultants, except for the generalist consultants like McKinsey. Hell, throw IBM in there, throw whoever.
Yeah, PwC, so on.
Right.
Okay, so we are at the top of the hour. We're going to bring this to a wrap. Anybody want to sort of do a closing 30 seconds?
I think one of the keywords we heard is organizations are in a discovery mode. That's not bad, except we're probably not easily visible on their radar.
Yeah.
That's a good takeaway, and we need to think about how we can help change that.
That's a good setup for next month. So thanks for that, John.
There
Thanks.
he is.
And thanks for all of the comments, and we'll have a video up sometime tomorrow or Wednesday, having a little bit of technical problems with those. Otherwise, have a great week.
Okay.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay,
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank you.
bye now.
Bye-bye.